Heartland, Mission, Texas today. In fact, where the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, the Guerrilla Media Network presents the Reynolds Reveal, the new weekly show that, no matter the limitations that may trammel inquiry elsewhere, sifts and winnows without fear or favor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Morgan Reynolds, and today is Wednesday, January 29, 2014. This is episode number 39 of the Reynolds Reveal. I appreciate you for listening in. And yes, we do welcome callers here at the Guerrilla Media Network. The number 218-862-9829. Last week, my guest was Matthew Bromstein, COO or Chief Operating Officer of the StarChildProject.com in Tampa, Florida. And we discussed the Star Child skull, so-called, a unique 900-year-old skull, which the evidence looks pretty sound to me that it is not a hoax. It likely is an extraterrestrial skull. If not that, it is an unknown or undiscovered species thus far. And that was found 900 years ago in the Copper Canyon area of northern Mexico. And Matthew is a very articulate, savvy hypnotherapist. So that was another interesting part of the interview. And he's founder of the only state licensed school of hypnotherapy in Florida. Well, today we shift gears dramatically, and my guests are two. We have Veronica of the Chapman family, a retired software engineer in the UK, and her principal website is fmotl.com, Free Man on the Land, and that includes access to her book, Freedom is More Than Just a 7-Letter Word. And she is, I think, a powerful mind and an intellectual adventurer, I would say, first-rate mind. Welcome to the show, Veronica.
Oh, hi, Morgan. Thank you for having us on.
And we have a second guest, Michael Doherty, and I'm going to ask, I know a little bit about Michael from reading up on his website, justicenow.co.uk, but I'm going to ask Veronica to introduce Michael Doherty.
Hi. You want me to...
Yeah, Veronica, give us a little... I read, now Michael... Well, maybe Michael should introduce himself. He is an aircraft engineer, among other claims. Yes.
Okay. Well, I could just say a few things. Because Michael was actually interviewed today by the BBC.
Dr. Reynolds, you there?
Yes, I am. I can't hear Veronica, though.
Oh, I think they had a microphone issue there. Veronica, are you back?
Okay, back.
Oh, there we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, start over, Veronica.
Okay.
We didn't get...
Sorry. Right. Yeah, as fate would happen, Michael was actually interviewed by the BBC today for a programme that's going to be broadcast on Sunday on UK television. I just very, very quickly give you the background. On the 4th of November last year, in Luton, which is where we are right now. On the 4th of November last year in Luton, which is where we are now in England, a man was captured by the police. He was taken into custody by the police, a guy called Leon Briggs, and 20 minutes later, he was perfectly healthy, and 20 minutes later, he was dead. And I've looked up the statistics, and according to the statistics, 535 people on average per year in the United Kingdom die in police custody. And the current, what's currently happening is the police are being issued with cameras, and there's a great debate on how that should take place. And if I hand over to Michael, he can tell you what he said to the BBC.
Yes, Michael
Morgan.
Doherty.
Hi, Pete. How are you doing? Okay, so I'm Michael Doherty from Justice Now, and we're a civil liberties organisation in the UK, and predominantly in relation to police accountability. And boy, have we got some work. Now,
Yes.
and I'm sure you've got a lot of work to do out there in the States as well. I'm
Yes.
involved with a campaign called Justice for Leon at the moment in Luton, and Leon Briggs was a 39-year-old man who was arrested by the police in the UK. Died, as Veronica said, within 20 minutes of being held in police custody. Now, the campaign that's built up around that is to try and get some accountability for policing, to get the truth, to get justice. In this country, in the UK, since 1969, there's not been one criminal prosecution in relation to police to deaths in police custody in this country, which is, I think, a shocking indictment of policing here. They're killing people, and seemingly no one's to blame. You've obviously probably heard of the big case Mark Duggan. You heard of the Mark Duggan case in the US?
I'll admit I haven't, except on your website this afternoon.
Well, the Mark Duggan case, just moving on from Leon briefly, the Mark Duggan case is about a young black guy in London who was shot dead by the police. He was alleged to have a gun on him, but not on his person, and he was shot dead, executed on the streets. That's what the case that led to the big riots in the UK in 2011? 2011. So 2011, there was massive riots right across the country, billions of pounds of damage, because the police put out lies, is the usual tactic. The smear put out about individuals. They put out about this individual moments after the shooting that he shot at police. Turns out completely and utterly false. In fact, the inquest has just happened very recently here in the country, so tensions are quite high again. They can't even tell who it was who gave the information to the sort of police watchdog in this country about the claim that this individual shot at police and the police had responded by shooting him dead. Completely and utterly untrue. That's what they do. They feed the media false information so that the public, trust the police and believe that the police are telling the truth. But we're having a absolute watershed in this country at the moment, certainly in the last 2 years, of the police being found to have been basically tampering with criminal investigations, infiltrated by organised crime. There's a big story in The Independent just 2 weeks ago where they've used Freemasonic networks. This is an operation called Tiberius in 2012. 2003, there was an operation called Tiberius, which looked at the Freemasonic links to organised crime in this country. And the findings of that investigation were that the police had been infiltrated by serious organised crime here in the UK. What did they do about it? Nothing.
When you said, Michael, did you refer to Freemasonic links?
Freemasons.
Yeah, Freemasons, the ones we have in the U.S. The Brethren. Yes, okay.
Yeah, I'm not casting any dispersions or anything like that. But if you Google, your listeners Google Tiberius, Operation Tiberius, there's an independent article one of the Nationals ran just a few weeks ago, which they'd been passed these papers, and this is Scotland Yard, the supposed finest police in the world, who had been infiltrated using Freemasonic lodge networks by serious organised crime to basically conduct police officers into whatever it was that they were up to. Some of the allegations are things like, for example, murder investigations were compromised through these networks. And the findings of this, shocking findings of Tiberius were that the remedy from this operation was that they were going to move these police officers, all these corrupt police officers that they'd identified, move them onto the same shift so that they could keep an eye on them. Not put them into the criminal courts and prosecute them, but move them onto the same shift. Now,
that's a very reassuring reform.
Isn't it just?
Now, Veronica mentioned one of the data points, and I wanted to point out in an article you posted on justicenow.co.uk, there you claim there's been 6,000 deaths in state custody since 1969 and 0 criminal prosecution.
Yeah, correct. I mean, this is prisons, detention centres, police custody. I mean, I'm predominantly concentrating my activities and work on police death custodies, but that gives you the sort of scale of, you know, people when they're supposedly, if rightly or wrongly, in state custody, the state's responsible for them. They're supposed to ensure their safety, make sure that they're, you know, looked after while they're in there, that no harm comes to them. You know, this is a large number of people that have died, lots of them in suspicious circumstances, with very, very poor investigations into their deaths. And we've got some really big cases going on. And I mean, I know you have in the States as well, Travian Martin.
Yes.
Travian Martin, one of your cases?
Yeah.
We've got a case of a young black guy called Sean Rigg in Brixton in London, who was killed by the police, by Metropolitan Police. He was detained under the Mental Health Act, which is gives them the power to detain people, but they're supposed to be taking these people to a hospital. What they're doing is beating them up, taking them to the police station, beating them up again, and then conducting very, very poor investigations into what actually happened, where things like CCTV goes missing, officers are allowed to put their heads together and collude as to what went on, and just last year...
You suffer from massive police corruption, and I know you are involved very directly as a victim and then as a private prosecutor, and we want to learn more about that later. But I want to turn to Veronica at this point and maybe ask her for an overview. Do you want to discuss your analysis of what is the law and what is not? What is how do the laws distinguish from legalese and rules for different societies? Do you want to address those issues?
Sure, I can do that. I had a big think a few years ago, and I realized that people were using the word law left, right, and centre. Law for acts of Congress, acts of Parliament, and law for just about everything, including a thing which we call the common law. But it occurred to me that no one had actually recognised that there is absolutely fundamental law. And we actually all use the words, but we forget we're using them. And I'm referring, for example, to the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of thermodynamics. An example, an obvious one being the law of gravity. And of course, with regard to 9/11, you are fully aware that Newton came up with 3 laws of motion. And so I thought to myself, well, if that's law, what are its characteristics? And I thought about it a bit, and I thought to myself, well, one characteristic is it made by men? And in the case of, for example, the law of gravity or Newton's laws of motion or Maxwell's laws or Ohm's law for electricity and so on, no, it's not made by men, it comes from the universe. So I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. That's one characteristic of law. So I thought, well, what's the next characteristic? Well, the next significant one would be, do we need a court to assess it? Well, no. Things fall down. They don't fall sideways. They don't fall upwards. They fall down because the law of gravity is like that. So we don't need a court for law. And then the third characteristic I thought of was, well, is there a penalty for breaking it? And the answer to that is no, because it can't be broken. You can't break the law of gravity. You can't break Ohm's law. You can't break Newton's laws of motion and so on. So I thought, well, okay, we call all those things laws. And
hold it. Wait a minute. Now, in a way, you can try to break one of these laws, like the law of gravity, but you can't. It's true. You can try, and you will be punished.
Well, yes. Okay. In the sense, for example, if the motor comes out when they, when the rocket leaves the ground, but then the motor cuts out for some reason, well, the law of gravity will take over, and that motor will, and that will come down with a bump. It's true, and I suppose you could say it's punishable that way. But I think it's fair to say.
Okay, but I interrupted your train of thought.
No, that's okay.
Yes.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, you do have a sort of a point there. But, I mean, fundamentally, you're not being punished. It's just that the law takes over. So I decided that those were good characteristics for something we call law. And so I thought, well, how do those characteristics fit with acts of Congress, acts of Parliament, and so on? And I thought, well, okay, let's take the first characteristic. Are they man-made? Well, yes, they are, if they come out of Congress or Parliament. So in that characteristic, they're the exact opposite of law. So I then thought about the second characteristic. Do we need courts to assess acts of Congress and acts of Parliament, and whether, someone has violated? Well, yes, we do. We do need courts. We have courts, loads of different kinds of courts, for various aspects. So, again, now we're in the opposite of law, because for law, we don't need a court. It happens. And then, of course, the third characteristic is a penalty for breaking acts of Congress, acts of Parliament, and the answer to that is yes. So in all three characteristics, we've got what comes out of Congress and Parliament, the exact opposite of a definition of law. And what comes out of Congress and Parliament is actually legislation, which I then shorten to legals. Or some people might call them statutes, and we can discuss the meaning of a statute later if we've got time. But fundamentally, what comes out of what is man-made is actually the exact opposite in the three major characteristics of law. Now,
let me ask a question, because
sure.
I think it's claimed here in the U.S. that regulations are 99 more times numerous than legislation or statute, because these regulators, the bureaucrats, have to clarify their rules, and then the courts pile on, clarifying the intent and the spirit of the law, and etc. So it compounds, although it's usually authorized, the mothership is statute. So we have all these rules or regulations in addition to the literal statute.
Yeah, that's right. You have things called title codes and that sort of thing, don't you? In the States. I guess we have similar things over here. I'm not quite sure what they're called over here, but yes.
Bylaws.
Bylaws, that's right, yes. Somebody just told me bylaws, which I think is probably right. So, yes, it compounded. You used a very interesting word just there, which I picked up on, authorise. That's something we could seriously discuss. But I won't at this moment.
Yeah,
I'll just go on to say that there is a third thing, which is in between, if you like, law and legal, and that is a thing called the common law. Now, if you examine the common law, first of all, what is it? And the answer to that is fundamentally it's the unanimous verdict of a jury of your peers, a jury of 12 people, who have heard evidence which is to the strict rules of evidence. In other words, no hearsay, not what a bloke down the pub told me, that's not evidence, but I saw it with my own eyes, evidence, and of course forensic evidence is evidence. And the jury, using their common sense, comes to a conclusion, which we call a verdict, for that specific matter. And I'm sure you realise there are an infinite number of matters that can arise. But the jury of 12 decides the law for that particular matter. If you actually analyse the common law using those three characteristics, they do actually work out as exact opposite, exact opposite, and exact opposite. So you could say, well, they're as ephemeral, if you like, as legals. But the point is that they use the common sense that innate into all human beings, hopefully not too far brainwashed out, but that's another aspect. But as you well know from our 9/11 days,
yes.
but it is, and also, of course, common law isn't perfect. Juries are not perfect. They can make mistakes and they can be novel. But it is the best that we human beings can do, I believe, in order to actually find the truth, assess the truth, and create some kind of justice. You know, I'm never going to claim it's 100%. I would never be silly enough to do that. But I think juries tend to do a pretty good job overall, although there are instances where juries can go wildly wrong.
Veronica, address the because you've written on this, and that is the common law when it comes to criminal behavior, unprovoked aggression, murder, rape, or burglary, plunder of various types, it's a consensus matter in every society. These are verboten.
Okay, I would kind of define the common law as the set of common sense rules that the vast majority, except the psychopaths, but the vast majority of people understand, which enables us to live in peace with our neighbours. And I would say that that was what the common law fundamentally was. You can.
Yeah, it looks like it's reconnecting. Ladies and gentlemen, stand by, and we will reconnect with our guest. In fact, Dr. Reynolds, if we could, let's just go to a brief break while we reconnect.
Okay, very good. You're listening to the Reynolds Reveal, and I'm your host, Morgan Reynolds, and we do welcome callers. If you would like to speak to our guests from the UK, Veronica Chapman, Michael Doherty, the number 218-862-9829. And Michael had the floor initially, and then we've switched to Veronica, and she's giving us an overview of law and lawful versus legalese and arbitrary rules and politically driven state agendas. So we moved away from the narrower issue of massive police corruption, which we're going to return to. But pick up again there on Veronica about why the common law is to be celebrated and everything else, I think, is to be scorned or at least be suspect.
Okay, I will do that. I just wanted to, something I did actually forgot to stress, and that is that because the general consensus of brainwashing is to call everything law, including what comes out of Congress and all those regulations and so on you were talking about. Fundamentally, we're calling law real law, and we're calling the exact opposite law. So obviously, the exact opposite gets imbued, if you like, with the characteristics of real law, like the law of gravity. And so, in people's minds, it is, you know, something that you just can't do. You can't break the law, because, you know, the law is set in tablets of stone. Whereas, of course, you can easily break the legal. And one of the things that I often do is when I'm in conversation, even with my friends, and they're using the word law, I interrupt them and say, no, you mean legal, don't you? And the idea is to get away from this calling everything law. Let's call these things what they actually are. And then I think that we clear our minds to some extent of the confusion between the two. So I wanted to say that. But now coming back to the common law, yeah, there are four sort of major characteristics: that you don't injure someone deliberately, certainly, and you, as far as you can, you don't do it accidentally, although there is a limit. You can't live your life taking every possible precaution. Similarly, that you don't steal from anybody, again, under the same scenario. You don't do it deliberately or accidentally, but there are limits. You don't breach anybody else's peace, and you don't use deceit or mischief in your promises, your agreements, and your arrangements. You say what you mean what you say, and you don't promise things that you really can't fulfill, because you'd be letting people down. They might take actions on the basis of the promise you made. And if you then go, oh, no, I can't be bothered after all, well, it's rather unfair on the person who has relied on you. And that all these things, if you don't stick to these things, you've got rancor between people who are trying to live together in peace. That's fundamentally what the common law is.
Okay, so how does this relate to, you turned me on, I believe the guy's name is Laurent Rose, libertarian.
Larkin Rose.
Larkin.
Larkin.
He enunciates very clearly the libertarian principles, which begin with self-ownership. You own yourself, nobody else does. And secondly, the non-aggression principle, which is really being addressed in these other four. These are forms, can be described as forms of aggression.
Yes.
Okay, so there's harmony between those libertarian ideas and your approach to the law.
I believe that they're identical. I've become a big fan of Larkin Rose over the last 6 to 9 months since I discovered him and what he was saying. I absolutely support every single thing he says. The only problem I have with Larkin is he doesn't understand the difference between law and legal and spends an awful lot of time trying to kind of describe what he's saying. And generally, actually, when he refers to legals, he says the word law and then holds his 2 fingers up on each hand and moves them up and down in order to sort of signify quote marks. So he understands that there's a difference, but he hasn't got to the core, which is use the right word. And you don't have to signify the quote marks. Apart from that,
here's another writer who I enjoy and had on the show a couple of weeks ago, economist Bill Anderson. He refers to the over-criminalization and all related ideas to where we've gone far off track. And he uses expressions. I want to get your take on this. One is malum se, the Latin expression, which is translated would say evil in itself. And another idea is malum prohibitum. In other words, it's acts that are declared prohibited, even though it's just it's not way out of consensus. It's a lady who grows a garden in her front yard, and that violates some rule passed by a city council, let's say. So what about those two? Are they pretty coincident with your ideas of law? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the whole point. I absolutely agree with that. That's absolutely true. And, in the first case, I would talk about law, and in the second case, I would refer to them as legals, where you're, prosecuting a lady for what you said. The whole point is that what's happened, and again, it's the same in America, it's the same in the UK, they've taken the word crime and they've expanded it to mean anything the government doesn't like. Well, crime, for a crime to exist, there has to be a human victim. That's the fundamental definition of a crime. And there is no such thing, for example, that they throw up as a victimless crime. I mean, what you've got there is a complete oxymoron. Victimless and crime, well, if a crime has to have a victim, then you can't have an adjective victimless, in front. You've got a contradiction in terms.
Hence the whole war on drugs as portrayed. That's the crime. That's the crime.
The crime is the war on drugs, and the unending war on terror, as your
terror.
Your ultimate boss once called it. Yeah.
So
anyway, that's fundamentally where we stand with regard to the difference between law and legal. And Michael's comments initially, that's the situation. And the point is that what Michael is doing is actually addressing that problem and doing something about it.
And so that takes us to Michael. Yes. Michael is initiating or pursuing in the courts private prosecutions of criminal behavior by police officers. So tell us, Michael, about this, because you know what, it's such a marvelous
example
thing you're doing for the rest of us.
Inspirational.
Yeah.
I mean, I you know, listen to what Veronica's saying about the law, and I fervently believe in the rule of law, that we're all supposedly equal in eyes of the law, whatever that may be. And unfortunately, and I think you've got the same problem in the States, is that the police seem to be immune from prosecution in many senses. And we've got an absolute dire situation here in the UK where it is very, very rare for the police to be prosecuted. We've got a watchdog, supposed we have a different system. I think you have the FBI investigate your police officers, but we have a system over here which is called the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And the level of independence of this organisation is that virtually, 9 out of 10 of their senior investigators are ex-police. 64% of their investigators or deputy senior investigators are ex-police, and 34% of their just normal investigators are ex-police. So pretty much it's the police investigating the police, and self-regulation has never worked. And just a bit about me very quickly. I'm an aircraft engineer, so I like engineers. You know, we study systems, we work out how to make things better, and I fell into some very serious police corruption, which led to me being put through a malicious prosecution. And
Michael, give us some of the details there.
Yeah, I'm having to be a bit careful because these criminal cases are live and going on at the moment. I mean, they've been described as historic and unprecedented criminal prosecutions because it's a member of the public, effectively, taking the police through the criminal courts. And so I have to be a little bit careful. But I can talk about, in general terms, what actually happened is, just to give you what behind this, you've probably heard there's a very, very serious paedophile problem here in the UK, where paedophiles in very high positions of power, very rarely prosecuted. I find my child being groomed over the internet, and this is the start of the story.
Now, define that term. I think that's a colloquialism that's not used here.
You know, so you get some adult trying to sexualize.
Seduce a child, or
So you know they're being sexually explicit with the child, trying to meet the child in hotels, that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I discover it as a responsible parent and report it to the police. Upshot of it is police do nothing. I call back to the police to say, look, you know, guys, what's going on here? The result of that was my home was dawn raided, 6:30 in the morning. In the end, there was about 11 police officers, cars all down my road. I'm taken naked from my house in handcuffs and put through a prosecution. Do you have harassment laws in the US? Harassment?
Yes, I think we do.
So under harassment laws, which is a very widely abused law, I'm supposed to harass someone and put through this prosecution. I'm acquitted when I produce telephone calls to show that what was said about me wasn't true. So it was my audio recording of what actually happened, which saved me from being labelled as a criminal, some sort of harasser of the police. Now, what then transpires after my acquittal at trial, it goes into a police watchdog investigation. They start this big high-profile, investigation.
Michael, what year was that when you were acquitted?
So 2009, arrested in 2008, 2009, acquitted, goes in for an investigation. They take a year to do it and acquit everybody. There's nothing wrong here, nothing to see. Using all the tactics that they used.
Just a mistake.
Refused. Basically, the investigation was a no investigation. Absolutely, virtually nothing happened in their investigation. So it's a sort of look, see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil sort of policy. Yeah.
And I know you cited on your website, justicenow.co.uk, perhaps coincidental retirement or departures from the force?
The amount of people that have retired around my case is extraordinary. It's over. What happens in this country? The police officers are on. It's a very privileged job to have. Not anti-police or anything like that. Very privileged job. It's a responsible job. Difficult at times, I'm sure. They only have to do, I think it's 28 years or 30 years in the job, and they get a very nice state pension. Yeah. Now, if they're going to be in trouble, they stand to possibly lose that pension. What they do, as soon as it looks like they're in trouble, the standard MO in this country, they retire early, grab the pension and go. So lots and lots of them have retired around my case. Whole swathes of senior managers, senior police officers have retired. And
Michael, then they can find new employment at the IPCC.
Absolutely. That's where they go. We've had an extraordinary, just touched on the retirement. We had a case where a guy was killed in the G20 demonstrations in 2008. 2008, a guy called Ian Tomlinson, 2009, sorry, 1st of April, wasn't April Fool's for him, but Ian Tomlinson was killed 1st of April 2009 by a police officer called Simon Harwood, and he was for the Metropolitan Police. This individual had retired from the Metropolitan Police at the early age of early 30s. He'd gone to a neighbouring police force, a civilian job. He then reapplied into the Metropolitan Police and came back to the Metropolitan Police, and it came out eventually about him. He had a catalogue of complaints about his aggression. And there he is, batten Mr. Tomlinson on the streets of London and kill him on video. And he eventually went to trial, but the investigation into him was so shot in terms of the evidential material that they would have produced that a jury in the end acquitted him of manslaughter. But so the retirement thing in this country, and you probably find the same in your country, they retire to avoid some sort of culpability. But back to my story, the investigation by the police watchdog finds a year later nothing's happened. What I do, and I think you have the same thing in any common law country. I know you have listeners in Australia, and I believe it's the same in Australia, Canada, and America. We've got a constitutional right of private criminal prosecution. It's fundamental to the English system that going back centuries didn't have these professional bar association, barristers and solicitors. What would traditionally happen is that communities would come together and fund someone, good at speaking, to prosecute on behalf of the victim of the crime. So that's where the basis of private criminal prosecution comes, and it's never been extinguished because it's a constitutional right. So it seems that...
But what's the Constitution? The British Constitution's unwritten, isn't it?
No. It's written. It's
written.
It's written in more than one document, unlike yours.
Okay.
Well, and we also, sorry to interrupt, we also have a Bill of Rights, just like you.
Okay.
It was established in 1689, and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights was what started off your Constitution and your Bill of Rights, because the immigrants into the United States, as it were, or the colonies as they were, brought with them the English common law.
Sure.
Or the idea of a jury and a grand jury. We actually had grand juries in our country until 1933, when because grand juries are common law, you can't get rid of them. But what they did was they subsumed them, or they suppressed them in favour of the institutions that we now have.
Well, the Act's actually called the abolition of the grand juries. But when you go into the Act in 1939...
33.
in 1933. It's called the Abolition of the Grand Juries Act, but it doesn't actually say that it was abolished.
Yeah.
They are suspended during wartime.
Yeah, that's
right. But yeah, so.
But, you know, but Michael, Michael Doherty's description of the use of the right of what I would say is more accurate, public prosecution, because you're saying the community would hire an articulate advocate to prosecute an alleged. And what's interesting is I, like others, call your cases examples of private criminal prosecution, but really you're a member of the public, and so you could better call it a public prosecution of crime.
Right. The name of the legal historian escapes me, but he's supposed to be one of the most figures in the English criminal law and a criminal historian. And what he said exactly that. He said that the system of criminal prosecution in England is not a system of private prosecution. It's a system of public prosecution, because any member of the public may bring a prosecution. And he explained it on terms of, as opposed to other countries, European countries, which have a system of state prosecution. Now,
the continental law system is different, or the legal system. And you know what? This is so inspiring. It says you as a citizen, or in Britain maybe you're called a subject, can initiate and solve your own problems, maybe with the help of others, but you are empowered.
Can I just say, it was the obviousness of that inspired me when I first met Michael. And when I understood what he was doing, or I saw what he was doing, I thought, oh my gosh, of course. If somebody wrongs you, you have the right to get redress. And you have the right to do it yourself. Why not?
And aren't the best ideas always so obvious when they happen? I mean, I've met some very interesting people on this journey. One of them said to me one time, he said, I've never, ever heard such a democratic activity that you're doing. Because, not waiting 5 years to vote someone in or out, but actually we all sit here, lots of people sit here, we talk about the rife corruption in society, yet we don't do anything about it, because maybe many people don't know what. Now, what about stepping up? What about building a criminal prosecution file? What about laying it in the courts and taking that prosecution forward? I've got currently 3 private criminal prosecutions running in relation to what happened to me in 2008. They're in the Crown Court. We have 2 systems. We have a system in this country called magistrates, which deal with very low-level offences, and then we have the Crown Court, which deal with the what are called the same in the US, indictable offences. So these are all indictable offences, and they're actually virtually all common law offences, like things like kidnap, perverting the course of justice, these type of offences, which are being run in the Crown Court. So, why aren't more? I fail to understand why are not more people doing this. I was subjected to serious police criminality, and despite the sort of might of these people, Metropolitan Police is an organisation of something like 62,000 people directly employed, a budget of £3.5 billion, and there's little old me, and I went down to the court. I mean, let me tell you how I started this. So I'm told by the watchdog, nothing's happened. Basically, go away, that's the end of it. So I've studied law because I wanted to go into aviation insurance, and with my aircraft background. So I studied law, and I was aware of private prosecution. So I built a prosecution file myself. You need to produce what's called an information, basically outlines, and it is this simple for your listeners. It outlines a crime that is known in English law, and that you have established on the evidence, a prima facie case, that this crime has happened. And the magistrates in this country, you lay it in the magistrates, and their discretion is very, very much tempered. If you're able to establish this, they should issue your summons. And I've been successful in all of the private prosecutions that I have started. And there's one of the cases which relates to false allegations against me is a simple case of perverting the course of justice. But you'll see on my website there's the two officers who led the raid on my home. Yeah, it was an unlawful raid on my home, so they entered my house without a warrant, without any powers to enter my home, and so I took information and built a case for, and these are the charges: kidnap, false imprisonment, aggravated burglary, affray, assault, actual bodily harm, misconduct in public office. I took that to the magistrates' court opposite their police station. And obviously all of their legal team will turn up, try and stop me getting this summons issued for these officers. And, we talk about people, a lot of people like to say all the court system is corrupt and it all doesn't work. But I have found very good, decent judges, district judges in this country who are prepared to do the right thing. And the district judge that I met on that day issued all charges with what's called a case to answer. And that particular case is been moved to central London before a judge called Lord Justice McCreath. And it's all very interesting. The officers are now ones who led the raid on my house are now standing in the dock on trial.
Now, their defense has stalled, and the cases have been deferred. Tell us about their
I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you in general sense. We had absolutely every obstruction is attempted to be put in place. We've got over here, we've got the police, and we've got a separate prosecutor, and very much the same as you. They're called the Crown Prosecution Service, and of course they're very, very tight with the police. And the very first private prosecution, their legal teams ran arguments trying to say that the case shouldn't be in the courts. They failed on that, and the case was set down for what's known as a plea hearing, where the individual would come in and plead to the charges whether they are guilty or not guilty. On that occasion, the prosecutor tried to stop the case. They rocked up to court, said, "We're taking over this prosecution and we're stopping the case." And on that occasion, the judge rightly put a stay on the case for 7 days, to allow me to go to the High Court, the Queen's Bench in the UK, to challenge the decision of that state body. Because what we've got there in that situation is, you're talking about separation of power here, which is another constitutional principle, that tripartite system of the administrator, the legislator, and the
court,
and the court.
Judiciary. Yeah.
Now, what you're saying is that the executive, the police, the prosecutors, that type of part of government, are able to come. One part of the executive is it seems able to come in, reach into the judicial system, and extract them from it and prevent prosecution. I mean, that is an absolute, I think, breach of that tripartite judicial separation of powers. Because what they're saying is that the judiciary cannot supervise their own prosecutions. If the court itself thought that this prosecution was not worthy to go to trial, they would stop it. They'll
dismiss it. They'll sanction you as a prosecutor, and they've got all the tools they need.
I mean, interestingly, the individual who tried to stop the case, who put down the order to stop the case, he was called the Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor for the particular area where the court was. Funny enough, what happened is the case went into the High Court. Yes, so that was in November 2011. There was an attempt to stop it, and August of last year, you'll again see it. There's a write-up in the Independent here, but in August of this year, the CPS eventually decide, before it goes into court in the High Court, for the case to be argued out against them, that the case does meet evidential sufficiency and is in the public interest to go to trial. Now, at that point, I can't say we can't say it's related, but it's quite interesting that the Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor of Bedfordshire and Thames Valley retired at that point.
My, what a coincidence.
Isn't that a coincidence?
Mm.
Yeah.
And I might tell listeners that they can get details like going to the independent version of this that you referred to on Michael's site, which is justicenow.co.uk. Well, welcome to Reynolds Reveal. I'm your host, Morgan Reynolds, and if you care to call in, you're welcome. 218-862-9829. And I've got two guests from the UK where it's approaching midnight, and we're having an tutorial from Veronica Chapman and Michael Doherty. And this is a good opportunity now to give Veronica the floor for a few minutes to make your observation.
Yeah, okay. Michael has kind of discussed the overall process, but what we haven't really stressed is that the process is really quite simple, and it really isn't beyond anyone who's reasonably erudite. The process comprises initially of simply writing up some background material, which Michael had a name for, I can't remember what.
Information.
Information, yes, which is probably about a page and a half, describing the situation with enough detail to give a pretty good idea. That's not evidence, that's just background information. The other thing that Michael does is to actually write the indictments, count 1, count 2, count 3, which is really just a statement of the offence, and then what is known as the particulars of the offence, which is something like you, such and such, on such and such a date, did do such and such, causing, me to, suffer whatever. Really just a paragraph. And one then just takes this, along with the evidence that one has, to what we call a magistrate's court. I'm not quite sure what you would do in the States. I don't really know if you have magistrates' courts, but of course you do have grand juries, which do the same job. And you effectively lay that information with the grand jury or the magistrates' court, and you discuss it in overall terms with a judge or a bench of magistrates. But the venue isn't suitable for actually hearing anything more than the overview of the evidence, as opposed to, like, have you got any evidence, as opposed to what the evidence actually is.
I mean, look, when you lay the information, you're not going down there and saying, here's all the evidence, you've got to produce it. I mean, one of the reasons for that is they don't need that, because there's a remedy. For example, Morgan, if I wanted to put a prosecution on you for whatever it is, you stole my laptop. Yeah, I could probably get a summons tomorrow morning for Morgan Reynolds in the UK. He stole my laptop. Your remedy, clearly you're in the US, you didn't steal my laptop, would be that I've started a malicious prosecution on you. Yeah, so you could take a prosecution against me if I'm laying false information under oath. So at the initial stages, you don't need to produce all of the evidence. You pretty much just outline the prosecution, and as I said, an offence that's known in English law, or in your case, known in US law, and pretty much you'll get your summons. Obviously, at some point in the case, that you're going to have initial disclosure, where you're going to have to hand over a file of evidence to the other party, to the defendant, to establish that prosecution is valid. So obviously at some point you're going to need to build up that case. But the interesting thing about criminal law, and one of the reasons why I went down this road, I mean, first and foremost, when these people did what they did to me, my first thought is, I'm not in any way unique. That you must be doing this to other people. And if I don't stand up, you will carry on doing it to other people. And I think that's something that your listeners and people all across the world need to understand. You're not unique when you suffer criminality from the state. You're not unique in any way. They're doing it to lots and lots of people. We all need to stand up, whether we win or lose. We need to stand up to make sure that, as a collective, they're not going to think we're all easy targets. I mean, I'm not setting out to lose, and certainly I think by the fact that I've got so far, I've already won. I mean, I've established that these people ought to have been on trial when the systems here in this country have said nothing's happened. Second, one of the other principles, we've had decades. I'm 42 years old now. I'm an ancient chap, but it started out, for me, my mid-30s. So it's a bit like Martin Luther King, who started his ministry at 36. So all of the legal systems here in this country, when the police do something wrong to people, the whole legal system has been geared up to take it down a civil road. And I think your country's the same.
Yeah.
So what happens effectively is, if you manage to get through all the hoops, is that the state pays the victim out of public money, yeah? But that in essence, to me, in simple terms, we the public are paying for the perpetuation of our own sort of enslavement. We're paying for the corruption. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
To me,
in other words, if you were to go down a civil road, the responsible individuals should suffer the financial losses that compensate the victim. And what would happen, it's very much like serving on a corporate board, where actually homeowners insurance actually has this feature in the U.S. quite often, but you need insurance. My wife is a registered nurse. Well, she needs insurance against, malpractice. So that's what would happen, but there's that market doesn't exist. And that would come out of basically the insurance fees paid by the responsible individuals rather than the taxpayers. So there's so many things wrong with our system now.
It's absolutely wrong. And I did some work and looked into the amount of money paid out in the UK in terms of civil claims against the police. And I found that for every £5 of taxpayers' money paid out from the taxpayer for wrongs, courts that the police have committed, £4 of that went to the solicitors. £1 went to the victim.
Yes.
So the solicitors are part of the problem. Their nose is in the trough. Yeah.
Yes. Now here's another idea about why the corruption is so extensive, and we've just touched on it because the individuals responsible aren't really suffering the way they should for their malfeasance, and that is here in the States we have what are romantically called bounty hunters. In other words, you have bail agents who put up the money, for against a criminal charge, and you're not convicted, and you're eligible to go free on bail. Well, if you don't show up, then they're going to send somebody after you. Well, those bail agents don't look for the most violent way to take you down. They look for the most, surreptitious, the easiest way to take you back. Okay, but the police do what you have experienced, and that is they use the most thuggish and violent techniques. They're testosterone-driven, this whole male, crazy, aggressive techniques.
When the video's the video of what happened in my home is not released because there's a criminal trial going on, it's not on. But there's these people in my house, my baby in the background, 8-month-old child, my wife crying her eyes out, while they threaten to smash a glass door in my face with these battering ram things. Yeah, they think this is not. They seem to think that this is normal behaviour. Yeah, so that you're absolutely right. That they have responsibility, but they have no accountability. They feel that they can go around and do whatever they like to do because they never believe that they will be held to account. That's why I took private criminal prosecution, because those individuals are now standing in the dock. They are before the court, and they were answerable. And I fully believe in the jury trial. They'll be answerable to 12 people who will decide whether they are guilty or not guilty. And I think that if they've breached criminal law, if I rocked up to someone's house, bust my way through their door, dragged them naked in handcuffs outside their house, my feet wouldn't touch the ground. I'd be in a criminal court, and I'd probably spend in this country at least 10 years behind bars for doing that. Why do these individuals who have put on a fancy costume, who can come and do the same thing under the colour of law, not be held to account? I don't find it,
Well, you know what is wrong with the law, and I want to get Veronica's take on this, is while the common law is the good law, and I mean in effect, plus it's morally right. And what happens is, because of special interests, in this case, the state interest, self-interest itself, the police, etc., is that immunities and privileges build up. So the statue of Justitia is corrupted. She's no longer blindfolded, nor is she weighing on a fair scale. Veronica, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's absolutely correct, Morgan. The whole point about the common law is it's decided by ordinary people.
About the blind.
Yes. Sorry, Mike was just reminding me of something specific about that. But can I just say one very important thing, okay, which has been, you were talking about money and so on, and I want to make it, it's very important. If you take a civil case, in other words, you sue somebody or you sue for criminal damage or whatever, you have to pay a fee. In this country, and it's quite possible in your country, if you start a criminal prosecution, it doesn't cost anything. It's free.
Because it's in the public interest.
Because it's in the public interest. Now, this is the whole point. Michael started 3 of these private prosecutions. It's cost him time.
Grey hair.
It's cost him grey hair, yes. It's cost him paperwork that he's created. But he hasn't paid 1 penny to any barrister or solicitor at this point. And, he's got a couple sort of queuing up, because it's so historic, he's got them kind of queuing up saying, oh, please let us take it over. But the point is that in a criminal prosecution, whether it's done by the state or whether it's done by an individual, it will be a case in our country, R versus the defendant. And R stands for Rex or Regina, because it's done in the Queen's name.
States.
In the States, I think it would be the state versus whoever.
Yes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Obama.
My federal case, I represented the United States.
Okay. Or it's,
the whole and the entire public.
Because
the U.S. prosecutor in New York didn't want to take up the case, of course.
Yeah. That's right. Your Keatam case. Keatam, yes. But the whole point is it's the state doing it. So they actually pick up the tab. Although you are standing there as the actual prosecutor, if you like, asking the questions, you're doing it on behalf of the state, because it's a criminal. In a criminal situation, the state picks up the tab because it's in the public interest.
I wanted to ask Michael, that's a great topic, because that was on my mind in terms of, is Michael Doherty suffering beyond kind of mental anguish? It's a stressful situation for over 5 years now, but has it impaired your ability to make a living? Are you generating a lot of good wishes and support outside of your immediate family?
I mean, in the UK, I've got widespread support all across the country. I mean, one good thing about the British public is they love an underdog. I think probably in the States too.
Yes.
It's not been done before. The sort of journalists and the national media have had a look. They've searched and they've searched and they found no example of a member of the public taking the police to the criminal court. And I think it's got to become common until the state starts to, the country, the police watchdog starts to actually hold these people to proper account, that does proper investigations, then we as the people in this country have to stand up, have to come together, have to start these prosecutions. We can't tolerate what's going on in this country anymore. Let me say, 2 weeks ago there was a national survey done in the UK, and one of the questions in that survey was about police accountability. One of the questions put to the survey was, do you believe that the police have a culture of cover-up? 53% of the British public said yes. Only 18% said no. Now they're probably police or associated to police, but you know, the vast majority of people in this country, this little island, know that the police have a cover-up culture, that you won't get justice against them in relation to their actions. Personally, it's got to stop. We've had a really big case, you must have heard of it, where the police have stitched up a minister in the British government. His name is, Andrew Mitchell. He was the chief whip of the Conservative Party, the party in power, and it's called Plebgate, Plebgate. You Google that. Massive case where one police officer will be going to jail over it, but where false accusations were made about something this minister was supposed to have said. And the result of that was that minister lost his job, or his ministerial position. So it's every strata of society, from the lowest to the, won't go the highest, our politicians. They leave a lot to be desired. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter anymore who you are, what colour you are, what creed you are. The police, they seemingly cannot be trusted to just tell the simple truth. And hence why we're trying to introduce in the UK something called Leon's Law, in relation to the young man who was killed in Luton, called Leon Briggs. And that's make all police officers wear body-worn cameras to record all interactions with the public, so we can monitor them when they're out on the streets. And so far, so good. We've got some really good political support for it. And this Sunday, they'll be airing an interview that I did earlier on today on the BBC in relation to Leon's Law.
Yes,
That's wonderful.
Can I just
Yeah.
about that? First of all, your original question was about Michael's support. Well, he collects followers on Twitter and on his Facebook page. I suppose you would say like confetti is thrown at a wedding. And the other thing I would like to say, coming back to Leon's Law, was that the actual police are being issued with these body-worn cameras. But what they're saying, and this is you couldn't make it up in one sense, but you could in another sense. They are saying, yes, but we will only switch them on at our discretion. And the Leon's Law argument is, no, you'll switch them on every time you interact with the public. It won't be discretional. And that's the thing, that's the idea we've got.
And Peter Morgan, you're gonna find this absolutely lovely. You've heard of the phrase, if you've got nothing to fear, you've got nothing to hide. We're telling the police that. If you've got nothing to fear out in the streets, you've got nothing to hide. Put the cameras on. How can you argue against that? You've told the public when you rolled out in England, Britain, we've got the biggest coverage, I think, in the world of CCTV. Yeah. We've got ANPR cameras, automatic number plate recognition systems, which are collecting 50 million hits every day on car registrations. You're travelling around the country. We are massively monitored as a public. Yet the people who have powers over us, the police, are unmonitored. They're unaccountable, and we as the public are saying enough's enough. We can't trust you anymore. There's a massive trust divide between the public and the police, and we need to redress that and bridge that gap. The BBC guy said to me today, one of the questions to me today, he said, come on, we've got massive austerity times, they're called over here, where you have the same, where they're telling us we're all in debt, and we've got a rein in the belt and everything. He said police numbers are going down, yeah? And what you're proposing with these video cameras is going to mean there's going to be less boots on the ground. My response to that was that Robert Peel, who is supposedly the founder of the modern police, he said that the police are the public and the public are the police. The problem the police have at the moment is that there is such a divide between the community and the police that they are seen as separate from us. They are not part of the public anymore. The public don't support their efforts. As soon as they bridge that trust gap, as soon as we start to trust the police and we have the community and the police as one, then their efforts will be supported by the public, and you wouldn't need so many boots on the ground.
Right. And, part of the problem, especially in the U.S., which is a continental-sized nation, is the centralization and the militarization of the police. It's no longer your local sheriff, which has its own corruption problems, but the point is that the locals are empowered in a sense, and the police are closer to the people. But I want to go back to Michael's comment about the cover-up culture and relate my experience, because down in Texas A&M University in Brazos County, I would get called up for jury duty every year or every other year. And a standard question when they're in voir dire, we're going to open up and tell the truth in jury selection. The standard question for the criminal defense attorneys was, well, how many of you think the police under oath always tell the truth? Okay. No one would raise their hand. Everybody's savvy enough to know they're self-interested in prosecuting or convicting the accused. Well, let's turn to Veronica. She's always got some insightful thoughts.
Yeah, I'm actually along sort of similar lines. I'm mindful of coming back to Lark and Rose, one of the videos he did recently, where he pointed out that I think it was in Colorado and Washington State. They passed legislation after lots of years of trying. They actually passed legislation, state legislation, obviously, to legalize marijuana, and that legislation hit the statute book. So now in Colorado, I think it is, and Washington State, it is legal to possess marijuana. Now, I'm actually, not pro-drug myself, but, this is an instance. And apparently, Obama turned round and said, I don't care what you voted in those states. I'm going to send the federal agents in, and if you possess marijuana, I'm going to have your butt. And apparently, the local state legislation said, oh, okay, that's all right with us. And the state, so the local police have gone, well, that's okay. We won't stop the feds coming in because, we just won't. And that's very similar in many ways to this, to what we have in the UK, where there is an authority or people who think they have authority who just ignore anything, even democratically decided, by the community or by the people of the state. We have the same endemic culture of arrogance. I can do what I like type of attitude. So yes, I wanted to sort of mention that.
Okay.
But the remedy is for everyone, everything, and somebody could any American citizen could indict Obama. That is the law. I know he's the president, but if you have the evidence, you are capable of indicting him. Yes, okay. Michael wants to talk about something else.
So I mean, that's on the sort of the point of the law and the rule of law, and no one's above the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
Michael's
in a utopian world, no one's above the law. I sent a link over to you, and you'll see it, and maybe you'll post it up. You can see it.
Yep.
It's quite a historic injunction.
Yes. Okay. Tell us about that, the injunction on the bishop, because our listeners can't see it.
Okay. So the Bishop of Westminster,
Roman Catholic.
Yeah. So there's case running now as well. I think when you're under the cosh, you know, for whatever reason it is that I'm not paranoid. They're out to get me. However, it involves all sorts of sections of society coming down on you, and there's been some involvement of the Catholic or part of the Catholic Church. And credit to the judge. You have data protection laws in the US. Data protection laws? Yeah. So data protection laws in this country primarily used to, you can access your own personal information. In the EU, in the Europe, it stems out of Stasi East Germany, which used to take massive files on their citizens. So they put into law data protection laws to allow you to access any information they hold on you.
We will learn more about the Stasi and data protection laws on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Reynolds Reveal. Welcome back to the Reynolds Reveal. I'm your host, Morgan Reynolds, and if you'd like to call in, please do, 218-862-9829. My guests today, Veronica Chapman and Michael Doherty, and we are discussing the law and prosecution of criminal cops. And before the break, Michael Doherty was explaining something about data protection laws. Michael.
So probably the same as in your country. We've got rights to access our personal information that organisations hold on us. I make an application to the Roman Catholic Church and say, okay, guys, give me any information you're holding on me. I get a reply back from them telling me that, yeah, we hold information about you, but we're not giving it to you because you will sue us. Yeah? And we're going to destroy the information. So I get very, very quick on my feet and go down to the local court and write up an injunction. Injunct them to not destroy this information, not to destroy it, and until my rights to the access to that information are determined by the court. And all credit to the courts here, because this is the Bishop of Westminster, and they issued me the injunction. So I must have a very cute way of getting my way in the courts, but now we've had a hearing with the church's legal team turned up, and quite interesting to hear over the tannoy. Can Michael Doherty and Bishop Arnold go to court one?
Discussing.
It's not very often you get that over the tannoy in the court.
Perhaps I should tell you.
Well, for your listeners, this isn't I'm not trying to, I know people are very religious. I'm baptized Catholic myself. This isn't about bashing down religion or anything like that. But, certainly the teachings of Jesus, you've got to think, what would he do in the circumstances? We've got situations where, children have been abused by members of the church. And what are the congregation doing about that? Sitting back, continuing to put money on the plate, and not ensuring those people are held to account. Now, I took that injunction when I got the injunction just before Christmas this year. So I went to the cathedral in Westminster with it and served the injunction on the church at Christmas. And I was thinking, I was coming to think about, am I sure about what I'm doing? I was sitting in Mass in the cathedral, and the responsorial psalm that day, when I was two-minded about what I was doing, was, this is the responsorial psalm, that in his day, justice will reign, and there will be peace on earth. So I thought, who am I to argue with that? I served the injunction on the Roman Catholic Church, and their defence is going to be, they're not going to give me the information because I'm going to sue them. So, very, very interesting. So, they're holding on to information which may relate to child abuse in the wider sense. They've had mandates from the very top of the Catholic Church that they're going to be transparent about their conduct. Yet here we see, yet again, an organisation that's, the Church, wanting to hold on to information to prevent litigation against them. Completely wrong.
Well, I've got no brief for either church or state. And I think Veronica probably shares that position. But I want to bring up, go back to the jury, because the common citizen and their common sense is such a justice promoter. And one of the terms that comes up is jury nullification, which might be described as a form of juries making law. Like if they, for example, if there is a prosecutor they think is abusive in bringing, like we have these draconian laws about convicted felons can't own a firearm even though they've been released from prison for 30 years, and maybe he's got a sporting interest or a self-defense. And I've seen abuses like this, and the juries will just say, this prosecutor can go to hell. We're not going to find him guilty, okay? Well, because it's an abuse of justice because he violated some arbitrary rule. So, Veronica, address that.
I can say a lot about that, actually. I understand that Vietnam vets have, for the last year or so, been subject to analysis, whether they liked it or not, and if they own firearms, the analysis would come down to say that that they were unsafe to hold firearms, irrespective of obviously your Second Amendment. Jury nullification. Well, the point about a jury of 12 is they don't have to take notice of any legal. You use the word law when you ask the question, and I was almost about to jump on you, Morgan, and say that should be legal, not law. Yes. That's the whole point. It's legal, not law. And the jury is actually the mechanism for making law. There's one set of law, which are the physical laws of the universe. The other set of laws is law for a specific circumstance made by juries. Everything else is just legals. And the whole point is that the jury concentrates on the evidence presented, comes up with a conclusion, a verdict. Now, it doesn't have to take any notice of any legal. And if one gets to the situation where a legal says one thing, but the jury looks at the situation in detail and says, well, I don't think he did anything wrong, and 12 of them agree, then they can say, well, we find this person not guilty, even though under a legal that person might be guilty. In actual fact, you have an example of that in the Prohibition era, I understand, where it was prohibited to serve and consume alcohol. And people were taken to court because they broke that, they violated the legals that said they couldn't use alcohol. And they couldn't find juries who would agree that the person was guilty. So that actually meant that the federal, Washington, D.C., had to repeal the prohibition laws. So you've even got an example of a big example of jury nullification back in the early part of the 20th century. So
it's the development of the common law, because the common interests have changed.
Because the common interests have changed, yes. That's
and the common law develops.
The common law develops. The common law develops on the basis of a case-by-case basis when juries look at a particular situation. And that is how the law evolves.
There's a very interesting position on juries in your country and as opposed to our country. And coming back to police accountability. I saw a very recent one in the US where a lady was awarded $2 million, I think it was $2 million, for an unlawful arrest in her home. Yeah, and in your country, it doesn't seem that you have been constricted in terms of a jury awarding massive damages to punish the police for their conduct, so they think twice about doing it. In this country, I don't believe it is the case that they can do this, but the juries are being directed that any awards of damages against the police have to be commensurate with personal injury claims in this country. So if you were injured when you're walking down the pavement, it has to be commensurate with that. You have to show some sort of damage. And, for example, malicious prosecution, yeah? So the police can maliciously prosecute you, make complete bullshit, make up complete lies about you, and prosecute you. The maximum that they will direct, the judges will direct the jury, the maximum they can award an individual for that is £57,000. About in dollars, maybe $100 odd thousand. Yeah. If in your country, if someone was maliciously prosecuted by the police, I'm sure the award would be in the millions of dollars.
This is we've spoken about all this, and this is something that we should bring up, and that is that what the state is trying to do is it's trying to water down the common law in favour of its legals, and it's doing it in a stealth process. For example, in the United States, it's watering down the abilities of grand juries, restricting them of what they can actually investigate, and also in courts, the judge is actually starting to, or not starting to, they've done it for a while, direct the jury. And that's also happening over here. Now, the judge actually has no right whatsoever to direct the jury in any way. The judge's job is very, very simple and very, very clear, and that is to make sure that the rules of evidence are followed, and also obviously to I'm
cool with a judge directing a jury, but what I'm not cool with is that the people have been so badly conditioned that they see him as some sort of authoritarian figure that they have to listen to his view. They need to understand, because I know you had big cases about jury nullification where they tried to prosecute individuals handing out leaflets in the US that said you don't have to listen to the judge, you can follow your own conscience and do whatever you want to do. And about jury nullification. If the people who are sitting on those juries know that they are the most powerful people in that court, that whatever's said in that court, they can follow their conscience and do what they believe that they need to do, then we'll be okay. But the problem is, we were talking earlier on about it, I'm not a football fan. I know you've got massive American football and baseball people, and over here, hundreds of thousands of people go out every Saturday, follow people kicking a football around a pitch. If people started to understand that, the systems of justice need the same levels of attention. People need to start to become more participants in the courts. They need to go and watch cases going on. It's free. Go down to your local court. Watch what's happening in your area. See how justice is being dispensed or administered in the courts, and get involved.
See how corrupt it is. And it's free, and I'm sure it's free in the United States, because you have public galleries the same way as we have public galleries, and all you have to do is to walk in and sit down in the public gallery. And if instead of going to, the Super Bowl or, to go, watch the New York Jets or whatever, just at least, one or two times, go to a local court and sit there and watch what goes on and be utterly devastated.
Or actually serve on a jury. I remember getting called up and the shape up to serve on a jury and always wanting out. So, somebody's up on charges of possessing 5 pounds of marijuana in his kitchen table at home, and they invaded his house. And come on. I completely disagree with this, and I get thrown out and don't serve on the jury, okay, because I don't agree with the legals, okay? But after a while I said, I'm going to shut my mouth and actually serve on the jury. Then I'm because it's a powerful position as we are.
It is the most powerful that an ordinary person has. And I'm very glad to hear you use the word legal in that context, Morgan. 10 out of 10 for that.
I can learn.
Yeah. It is where your power lies. You think you're small, alone. Maybe you've got some firearms that you think you can protect yourself with, but by golly, they have got many more, firearms than you could ever have. But you have this power to make a change by sitting on a jury and doing the right thing and telling the state, telling the federal state, no, just like they did in the early 20th century with the prohibition laws. It's still possible, and you do it by sitting on a jury. We had the ludicrous situation way back in the 1600s, where a guy called William Penn, who was, an Englishman, was preaching on the street corner, and he was taken to court. A complaint was made that he was, annoying people, and fundamentally because he was spouting all his, religious views and so on. And there was a jury, and they looked at the situation. They said, well, he's not really doing anything other than spouting out, and if you don't want to listen, walk away, for heaven's sake. And the judge, in that case, was so incensed that the jury should find Penn not guilty that the judge put Penn in jail and the jury. Oh, yes. And it actually happened, and you can Google it. And, until somebody went, excuse me, but you can't actually do that. So obviously they let them all go. William Penn then emigrated to the United States and founded Pennsylvania. So, that's the history.
Which was the most successful colony, most prosperous because the places were liberal with a little L, liberal.
Yeah, slightly historic Pennsylvania, yes. Where, of course, I think Larkin Rose hails from, coming back to him. But, yes, this is the whole point. As a member of the jury, you're untouchable. You are untouchable. You can vote according to your conscience, no matter what anybody else, may try to direct you.
Now, the legal professionals, both the prosecution and the defense counsel and the judge tend to cling together in trying, of course, to direct the jury. Control them. And the more uncontrollable and commonsensical they are, the better for us all.
Well, I actually remember a long time ago when we were in the 9/11 research group, and I remember somebody emailing, it wasn't me, and I remember somebody emailing the rest of the group saying we need unity here. And I distinctly remember someone called Morgan Reynolds emailing back to everyone in saying, no, we need disunity. That's what we need. And, it was you.
Only individuals can think.
Exactly, only individuals can think.
There's another very, very good example here in the UK about, normal people coming together to right a massive injustice. It's called Hillsborough in the UK, and it was where 96 people died in a football stadium. They went to football, Liverpool. You all know who Liverpool are. These 96 people died when police mismanaged the situation. What happened is, over 26 years, police covered up their involvement in the deaths of those individuals, until what's become known as the Hillsborough Panel was formed. The Hillsborough Panel were just various members of the public. There was the Bishop of Liverpool was on the panel. Various people, just normal people, came together, sat on the panel, and got powers very much like a grand jury, call in evidence to examine what went on. They wrote a report, the Hillsborough Report, which has now led to criminal investigations into some of the highest levels of the police here in the UK.
Many of whom have retired.
Yeah, retired very, very quickly.
Detecting a pattern here.
Yeah. So they've all retired. Lots of them retired. But interestingly, in that case as well, now that criminal investigations have started, obviously they're utilising police resource to investigate. They've actually, quite historically, in this country, they've actually background checked all the individual police officers who are investigating now the possible criminal prosecutions, to see whether they are part of the Freemason network, and if they were, they're being removed from that investigation. So they again believe that in that particular instance there was Freemasonry connections in that cover-up. So, but it shows the power of just an ordinary person, ordinary people coming together, putting common sense hats on, looking at the evidence, seeing what's happened, and coming out with judgment.
Can I say something else? And can I say something?
Yes.
Not phoning your centre, not emailing your centre, not going on a march or anything like that, sitting down and coming up with prosecutions. That's the way. Instead of going out on demos and having letter-writing campaigns and, get on the phone to your senator who's not in the slightest bit.
Petitions, you love petitions.
No, petitions, they love petitions because
you love petitions.
No, I don't love petitions. They can throw the petition. I mean, they'll take the petition and they'll, nod and say.
Petition the courts.
Yes. They'll say that, they will look at it seriously. And as soon as they turn around and go inside, it goes straight in the bin. What you've got to do is to organise small groups of people, maybe, to get together, create some evidence, take it to...
Well, not create evidence.
No, create...
Gather evidence.
Gather evidence.
Create is,
yes, all right, Michael. Yes, gather evidence.
No planted evidence.
No.
Yeah.
Gather it together and present it by laying information in a court or again, with a grand jury, and processing it yourself. And I come back to it. It is the right of every American, if they have the evidence, to prosecute Hillary, prosecute Obama, to prosecute what's his name, Eric, who's the attorney?
Eric Holder.
Holder, that's the guy. Any of them, and any of the past ones, if they're still alive. The only thing that stops you prosecuting them is they're dead. So that is a bit of a block on prosecuting. But while they're still alive, if you can gather the evidence, there is nothing to stop you.
Well, okay. Now here, I am hearing that Michael Doherty is finding, we'll call it sympathetic courts or justice-minded jurists. But over here, one of the problems is you get into a federal court, if you're not in the right court, and I believe there are some right courts, you're going to get sanctioned because I go in and prosecute Bush Cheney for 9/11, let's say, you're subject to financial sanctions. Because when the other side asks for a dismissal, they ask for heavy sanctions to ruin you. Now, Michael, you're doing all right in the English courts, the Crown Court, so far.
But see, the thing is, I mean, I don't know what your experience of prosecuting and what you're talking about there. It sounds to me like a civil case, because
It was a civil case, yes.
okay, so and that's the issue. See, when you're up against a state who have bottomless pockets of public money to defend, they play a cost game. It's like going to a casino with a dollar in your pocket, and you're playing poker with someone who's got unlimited reserves. You're never going to beat them because they can just keep upping the stakes, as you probably found. When you're talking about a criminal prosecution, because of the very fact that the prosecution is the United States of America versus whoever it might be, and it's in the public interest, the costs of that prosecution, both defense and prosecution, are paid for by the United States. Yeah? Because it's in the public interest. It's the same in this country. Regina versus whoever the defendant might be. It's in the public interest. So the public, both the defense and prosecution, have access to public funds.
Okay, but Michael, address the question of, well, I guess the cases are ongoing. You've got 3 criminal prosecutions ongoing, but you're finding, let's say, so far satisfactory attention to justice by the court itself.
I think the most important thing for your listeners is that this is real. This is really happening. These people are really in the courts. There is a court case going on, and that these things are going to be aired out in public. They're placing massive obstructions in the way. But like climbing a mountain, the first person to climb the mountain may not get to the top. But by heck, I've shown the path on the way up. And maybe the next person behind me, might do it just that little bit different. But the route's open. Yeah, the route to the top is open. And people need to start climbing up after me. Yeah?
Fantastic. It's just gives me goosebumps. Veronica.
Oh, yes.
Inspirational, Morgan.
Yes.
And okay. Michael's first private prosecution discussed, which was put on hold for about 2 years. About 2 years, and has finally been unstayed. We're very close to the next hearing on that. Now that it's been unstayed and it's going to go ahead, and that's to take place on the 10th of February, isn't it?
10th of February.
And that will be actually in Luton, where we are right now.
Can I just say a little bit more about myself, Morgan and Pete?
Please.
Sometime I used to an aircraft engineer, and I ran 2 marathons. Yeah, you know marathons.
Yeah.
I ran the London Marathon in 2003. I ran the London Marathon in just over 3 hours, so good time. I jumped on a plane, flew to Boston, and I ran your Boston Marathon in the morning.
Woo! Oh.
And I ran that in 3:26. What a wonderful bunch of people in Boston. Amazing town, great marathon. Now, this...
Well, that's our Ireland here, Michael, of course.
I know, so they're very welcoming to me. Obviously I'm Irish. The journey, I like to call it, this journey, very like that journey. It's a long distance, effort. But, got to have stamina. But it's worthwhile doing it. I know where the finish line is, and I will be getting to that finish line, like I did in those 2 marathons. So, I just got to emphasise, like Veronica's emphasising, more people have to do it. As soon as at the moment, it seems that corruption is cost effective for them. Yeah, because no one challenges corruption. Widespread, rife corruption going on in society, and no one's challenging it. So when more people start to challenge it, it'll be more cost effective for them to address the corruption themselves than have us do it.
The obvious saying that I think everybody knows for evil to prevail, all it takes is for good men to do nothing. That's one very important thing. And
Got to wrap it up, Veronica.